Hello, and welcome to our springtime Wildflower Walk, hosted by Dakota County Parks. Today, we're exploring for spring ephemerals, the short-lived wildflowers of the forest floor, and we're visiting both Spring Lake Park Reserve near Hastings and Meesville Ravine Park Reserve between Meesville and Cannon Falls. Thanks for joining us on our trail today as we're looking for these little signs of spring. Spring ephemerals have a strategy of coming out right away as soon as it warms up. They are trying to beat out the shade from the forest canopy, so they have a very short window to make some food and then bloom and spread their seeds. So what we're looking for is both foliage, the leaves, and the flowers today. Both can be good for using to identify the flowers. And we'll just take a stroll and check them on out. The best time to see these is weather and temperature dependent, but the season can start as early as mid-April and continue through early to mid-June. So come take a walk with us on the trails and we'll see what we can find. Dutchman's Breeches, or Dutchman's Breeches, which is another neat little spring ephemeral. It's so called because the flower reminds whoever named it of the pantaloons of the traditional Dutch costume hanging out on a line. So they kind of look like little white pants hanging out upside down. It's kind of a unique flower. The nectar is way back up in the little horns of the flower, and so it's kind of limited to pollinators who have really long tongues, unless they have figured out that they can cheat and bite the tips of the horns off or the bottoms of the pant legs off, and then they'll just suck the nectar out of it. So little cheater pollinators there getting a free snack out of these, but kind of a cool little plant with some very feathery looking foliage. So here we got a little bloodroot. This is another neat little spring ephemeral. It's called bloodroot because if you, when you dig it up or if you injure the leaf or the stem at all, it has this red latexy kind of rubbery sap, and that that's where it gets its name from. And this one is kind of a neat little plant. They get spread around the woods by ants, actually. And they have this little seed pod that comes up at the end. And the seeds have this little sugary coating on them called an elaiosome. And the ants will eat that part, and then the seed is like a cherry pit, and they'll just go throw it on their trash pile. And then you get these little rafts of bloodroot in the woods. And that's where the ants threw out their garbage. So it's kind of a cool thing to find out in the woods. This one's all by itself though, so cool. Here we got some wild ginger. It does have a gingery smell and taste to its root, but it is not the same as the ginger that we use in cooking that originates in Asia. Wild ginger makes an excellent ground cover on the forest floor and spreads through rhizomes underground. And this one has the flower not up in the air, but really down close to the ground. It's kind of a maroon color because this plant is actually pollinated by ground-dwelling insects like beetles. And so the flower is down close to where they're going to hang out and run around so that it can get its pollination taken care of. Here we have some nodding Trillium, one of 4 species of Trillium that can be found in Minnesota. It's called nodding Trillium because the flower hangs down below the leaves and kind of droops and nods along in the wind. Trillium is another one of our spring ephemerals that can take up to 7 years before it has enough energy to put out a flower. And if any part of the above ground plant is picked, it will not have enough energy to flower for many years to come. So these are best enjoyed in the wild. They are a favorite of deer. So if you see Trillium, the deer population is not out of control. Here we have some white trout lilies. There's a few that are actually blooming, which takes a while for the plant to get to that point. It can take up to 7 years before it has stored enough energy to flower. And as you can see, the plants that have the flower have 2 leaves coming up out of the ground, and then you see a lot of just solo leaves in the woods on the woodland floor around them. So those plants have not amassed enough energy yet to produce a flower. So the 2 leaves is indicative that it's going to flower. Trout lily gets its name from the kind of purpley brown speckled mottling on the leaves that is reminiscent of a brown trout's pattern on the side of their bodies, and so that's where it gets its name, the trout lily. We also have yellow trout lilies in Minnesota. It's the same, related, but just a different color and different species of lily. And then we also have the dwarf trout lily that's endemic or found only in Minnesota, and it's only in some small parts of the state. Here's a little patch of spring beauties. These are some tiny little flowers with 2 little grass-like leaves coming out of the ground. And these will have nectar guides on the petals. You can faintly see some striping on the pink to purple petals on there, and those serve as runways for pollinators to guide them on into the load of nectar and pollen that's in the center of the flower. And these plants arise from a corm, a potato-like tuber underground where a lot of the energy is stored for it to be able to flower in the spring. Forest. These are another one of the plants that can get spread by ants looking for the tasty seeds. Here the forest floor is carpeted with Rue Anemone. And this little flower is neither a rue nor an anemone. It's actually in the buttercup family. The anemone name comes from the flower, which is similar in shape and color to true anemones. And the rue comes from the shape of the leaves, which is similar to the meadow rues, the early meadow rue and the tall meadow rue. Rue anemone can come in white, like we're seeing here, and it can also be in various shades of pink and purple. It doesn't actually have any nectar to offer pollinators, and instead attracts them through the color and shape of the flower to come spread their pollen. But it actually spreads mostly with rhizomes underground and ends up carpeting large chunks of the forest floor like we're seeing here. Here we have a nice clump of large flowered bellwort. It's in the lily family and it looks a little droopy. That's just how it normally looks. It has an interesting genus name, Uvularia, which sounds similar to the uvula, the little appendage in the back of your throat, but it actually translates into woodland daffodil because of its yellow daffodil-like color, and it's also grows by or spreads by rhizomes through the woods like a lot of our spring ephemerals. And it has one relative, the wild oats, which would have a white flower instead of a yellow one. So thanks for joining us on our woodland wildflower adventure, and hopefully you learned some new flowers to look for, ID tricks and names to put to some of the flowers that you see each spring when you come and explore the parks. And hope you enjoy your next walk on the trails.